Hi, my name is Travis Williams. I'm owner and lead counselor for True Impact Counseling Services PLLC. Today, I'm going to be going over just a brief introduction to cognitive behavioral therapy triangle. I hope that you find this to be very helpful. Today, we'll be going over a document that I created. Um, Very basic information. This again is just meant to be an introduction. Feel free to hit me up on my website, or you can contact me directly through my Psychology Today posting. Give me just a second here. I'll attempt to share my screen and we'll get started. So up here, I have a very basic document. This is a CBT triangle. We have thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Right here is where I tell my clients we're going to have most influence when it comes to the techniques and interventions that we'll be learning when we go over this triangle. And that's because our thoughts really act as accelerators and brakes for our emotions and unhealthy behaviors. Um, the text box on the right, I do make a point to highlight that there is not a direct causal relationship between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Instead, think of each of these factors as independent and codependent all at the same time, with each one being able to influence the other. Thoughts on thoughts. I hope everyone likes my little cloud bubbles. I'm used to writing blogs and communicating in writing, but I thought a video would kind of shake things up. What do my thoughts mean in relationship to my emotions? When it comes to your emotions, think of your thoughts as brakes and accelerators. A little bit more about that on this page. Brake versus accelerator. When it comes to our emotions, our thoughts act either as a brake or emotions on our emotions or accelerate them. Acceleration in this context means to reinforce inaccurate or flawed thinking, as well as allowing such thinking to go unchecked. It can also come from negative self-talk, self-judgment, and self-criticism. What we really try to spend a lot of time on is really mastering, identifying when we are falling into a cognitive distortion. And basically, that does require some work, developing a sensitivity to hearing yourself, so to speak, but also using those interventions that we come up to counter those cognitive distortions. Um, a little bit more on number two regarding self talk. Don't let anybody fool you. It's good that you actually talk to yourself and that you can hear your inner voice. Oftentimes, when we begin to recognize our inner voice, what we find is that it can be very negative, and that's not what we want. We want our self talk to be positive, affirming. But again, people are in therapy for a reason, and oftentimes, when we work in this area, people are discovering that their self talk is very negative, which means that you're doing a lot of self judgment and you are highly critical of yourself. Uh, our thoughts act like brakes when we develop the necessary skills to challenge inaccurate thoughts. Examples of when our thoughts act as a brake is understanding and recognizing those cognitive distortions, memorizing and implementing challenge questions to help counter inaccurate and flawed thinking, and then finally, developing value based decision making. What I mean by value-based decision making is that, take myself for example, as a man of God, I put a big value over my life regarding my faith. That is, my faith helps me in a lot of different areas when questions come up. But whether you are a person of faith, or you have no faith, or you are just kind of in a crossroads, so to speak, and you don't know where you're at, I do think that developing a value based decision making process is a great way to be able to ground yourself emotionally, as well as recognizing those cognitive distortions that we all tend to have. But the more we recognize them, the more productive we can be in really not allowing those emotions that come with those cognitive distortions to take over. So again, I hope this is good stuff for you. It's very basic, but I want to move on and start to talk a little bit about emotions. Regarding our emotions, key challenges here include recognizing and developing a sensitivity to emotions and moods. Truly recognizing what you're feeling means that you are able to put a name on your emotion. Um, Let me back up for just a second. When we're talking about emotions, they are one-time shot deals. I'm angry, I'm angry. Mood is a little different. If, say, for example, I've been sad, sad can become a mood and therefore depression if you're sad every day for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You have to become sensitive to both emotions and moods. Both are very important. And I work a lot with clients in establishing that skill set. Um, Again, another difficulty behind emotions is that we have primary and secondary emotions. And sometimes we don't always do a good job recognizing which one is which. For example, if you are a parent of a teen, oftentimes I could imagine a scenario where you're not happy with grades and performance in school. And I do get in that moment of frustration, parents raise voices, they maybe get loud because they're emphasizing that they're disappointed in how that child is performing. But if we can get real about what's really going on in those moments, and again, we're talking about primary and secondary emotions in this example. What really is behind that anger is fear. Fear that my teenage child is not going to be as independent as they should be. My teenage child is not going to be properly prepared for college. Uh, and then probably even more so, I'm scared because he or she is not developing what I consider to be those necessary skills that he or she should have. So if something happens to me, they'll be able to do for themselves. And that is more fear than it is anger. But we as parents don't often voice that. But how much more impactful would we be if we could get real about the primary, which is I'm scared for you, young lady, young man, and not just I'm mad and disappointed that you can't get your act together in school. Again, very simple illustration, but that's what I mean by primary and secondary emotion. And then secondly, we tend to lack emotional awareness. And that just means that, oftentimes we don't know why we're mad, why we're worried. And we sure enough don't even really put two and two together and understand how that worry and sadness is impacting our behavior or impacting us as a person and those around us. Let me see here, behaviors. One of the things that I wanted to highlight as far as behavior is that they can be just as hard to recognize often as our emotions. It takes some time to recognize and develop awareness in our behaviors. In our interpersonal relationships, unproductive behavior often appear in how we communicate with one another. Like I'm thinking of couples work here. There can be a lot of passive aggressive behaviors. Um, what is it? Uh, Being angry towards somebody might just be avoiding that person. It could be always having a horrible tone or a nasty tone with that person. It could be always a raised voice or a sarcastic voice with that person. Nevertheless, these are behaviors. And sometimes they are often a more accurate reflection of how we really feel than we actually share in that moment if someone was to ask us. So again, it's just about becoming sensitive to those behaviors. I have a note here, behavior is an indicator of how we really feel. Think of behaviors such as passive aggression, avoidance, or self-isolation. All of these behaviors are more accurate of how we feel than we often admit. Behaviors continue Key takeaways is never underestimate the ability of behavior to influence emotion. In other words, sometimes you got to do some things to help you feel a certain way. Think about it when we talk about gratitude, the act of noting what you're grateful for, writing it down, looking at it, actually have it in front of you, feel it, often will help you get out of a, a, a sadness, a depression, because all of a sudden, by writing down and constantly reflecting, making it real to you, you realize that even though I have this sadness right now, and I have so much that I can be grateful for. So again, behaviors can do that. Unhealthy behaviors often co-sign or reinforce negative emotions. Think about that when we're talking about couples who are arguing and fussing and not getting along. Those cold shoulders, that silent treatment, that raised voice, that sarcastic voice, it takes its toll. And even though you may have in your heart to repair that marriage, that relationship, all that behavior just makes it so much more difficult for that healing to take place. But that's about behavior and not necessarily about, an emotion at that point. It's your behavior causing the separation and the distance. And then finally, developing awareness of a negative behavior secondary to emotional hurt you experience is helpful for both addressing the underlying emotion and the thought related to it. In other words, your behaviors go both ways. If you show love, if you demonstrate respect, and you affirm that person and you validate that person through the way you talk, through the way you present, it does make a difference in how your partner receives you. It does make a difference in how your child receives you. So again, these are behaviors, but they can reinforce or counter negative emotions. All good stuff here. I know I'm going over it quickly, but I just wanted to introduce this to you. I think that I'm at my last page here. Again, this is basic stuff, but it's something that I go over with my clients first 1 to 2 sessions. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me directly. You can do that through my website, trueimpactcs.com, or you can also follow me on Psychology Today. God bless you. God keep you. I pray that His undeserved favor cover you and that you be safe out there. And please take care. God bless.